Hi again, I'm Ian Ballantyne, a developer relations engineer working on the Google Ads API team. I work closely with developers implementing Performance Max using Google Ads API, and I'd love to share with you some typical business objectives that can be achieved using PMax and how to go about implementing them with Google Ads API. So, let's go ahead and get started. As you've heard in our other sessions, the principle behind PMax is to help you achieve your business goals using bidding targets and other configuration, then enabling the power of Google AI to optimize your campaign, allowing you to reach the right audience at the right time. We've identified a number of business goals that Performance Max is well suited to, and you can see them here. Online sales or lead generation, where you might want to encourage customers to make a purchase, generate leads by gathering contact details through a sign-up page, increase traffic to your website so you can distribute information. Online sales with a product feed, sometimes referred to as retail, where you have a collection of products that you have uploaded to Google Merchant Center and you want to drive those sales to those products. This goal can also include vehicle inventory, which is available in select regions. Travel goals, sometimes referred to as hotels, where you have hotels that you can provide hotel properties feed or a hotel center account and you want to drive bookings to those properties. Store goals, where you have one or more physical business locations that you would like to send customers to and to drive sales from the shop visit. Store goals with local inventory, where you have products for sale in a physical location and you want to show products that are available to purchase nearby to a customer or enable customers to purchase online and pick up in store. Unfortunately, we can't go into depth on all of these goals, but we will go into more detail on online sales or lead generation, online sales with a product feed, and travel goals. But why should we care about goal-oriented advertising rather than traditional approaches, such as bidding directly on a compiled list of keywords, or designing a bespoke marketing campaign to work on a range of formats and devices? Well, allow me to give a hypothetical example of an end advertiser who uses a third-party platform to manage their business. That third party has integrated with Google Ads API to provide Performance Max campaigns seamlessly into their platform. And let's see what that might look like. Jenny runs a flower shop called Beautiful Flowers. She wants to get started with advertising on Google, but she doesn't know the best place to begin. She has a modest marketing budget of $500 a month and is trying to understand the best place to utilize it. She has a website managed by a third-party management business, let's call them Build My Business, and that includes photos of her store and prices for a collection of flower arrangements that she sells. She also takes custom orders through calls to her store and via a website form. Plus, she has a social media feed with pictures of events that she has done flower arrangements for, as well as some of her custom order creations. She has relied primarily on social media and word of mouth to promote her business, but now wants to expand further. She has a good idea of where her sales currently come from. She can see the types of search terms, media posts, and other referrals to her site that customers have used before she makes a sale. She has limited information about her audience other than the gathered information from visits on her website, and she knows a few segments that she does a lot of business in, such as weddings and corporate events. When it comes to where she wants to invest her budget, she knows she would consider increasing her sales from Google searches by bidding on keywords. She would like her arrangements to appear on a list of products in Google searches, and knows to do this that she would need to create and manage a search campaign and a shopping campaign, but she's unclear on how much budget she would be applying to get results for each. While updating her website with new arrangements and social posts, she notices an Advertise My Business on Google button on the admin page. When she clicks it, it takes her through a process asking for a few simple questions about what she wants to promote, what she wants to achieve, and for example, sell my products listed on my website. She also chooses an option to use information from her website design imagery, orders, and analytics to help kickstart her advertising. Next, she is presented with a series of images and videos from her website, which she can choose whether they're going to be included in the advertising or not. She also uploads some additional images of flowers at her events. She selects from a few categories of themes she wants to be associated with, for example, weddings and corporate events, and then she pushes a button to finalize her advertising and add a payment method. Are you curious about what the button did and how the workflow is executed on the back end? Well, you have to stay tuned to this session to find out. A week on from that, she can now see a few products that have been sold and a few submissions to the custom order request form that have come from ads. After a few months, she is surprised to see that at least one of her flower arrangements that was not very popular before is selling rather well. The website admin page is able to show her that this has come from a new category of search terms that she's never seen before, Pleasantly surprised by the results so far, she applies a few of the suggested recommendations, including one suggesting her budget is limiting her ability to drive sales of higher revenue products. Jenny decides to increase the budget to $1,000 a month and starts the process of finding someone on her team to help manage and expand her online sales inventory. So what factors were at play that helped Jenny? Firstly, she recognized her website provider, Build My Business, had already had access to a wealth of information and content about her business that she could leverage to set up her advertising. This included not only her products and sales records, but analytics about the usage of her site and first-party information about her current audience. She could have gone directly to Google, but since she already managed most of the other aspects of her business through the third party, it was much more convenient to have it consolidated into a single location. Next, she was able to clearly articulate what she wanted to achieve: sales of my best-selling products and more leads for creating custom bouquets, even when she didn't know precisely how much return on ad spend to expect to achieve for them. Next, she was presented with a clear view of the performance of her advertising without much marketing jargon, and she didn't have to worry about how the campaign was being configured and how ads were being created from the information that she shared. She did notice, however, the information she provided, such as marketing material on her website, resulted in sales from her request form. This was possible because of audience signals and media content that she was able to provide via her website. Google AI was able to learn from and make a connection to a new audience that may have been on a different channel: Google Display Network, Discover, Gmail, YouTube, none of which she originally planned to market on. Finally, this all came together because the campaign running her advertising behind the scenes, Performance Max, was business and goal-oriented. Once Google AI had learned what type of advertising would lead to achieving these goals, it was able to shift the advertising budget to spend on the right audience at the right place and at the right time. This optimization and learning was accelerated by the audience and search teams provided programmatically by Build My Business and directly via Google Ads API. Well, you may have already guessed it, but a business with the skills to execute this for the customer experience is you, the developer. Whether you have thousands of customers already, similar to Jenny, or whether you have a few customers that are thousands of times the size of Jenny's business, the one constant factor is that to scale the business goal-oriented product, Performance Max, is to use a technology like Google Ads API. I'm going to show you how you can implement an integration similar to that of a third-party business that I just described. We'll talk about the lead generation and product sales objectives and how you can recreate this in Google Ads API. So let's dig deeper into how to implement these core concepts. There are two key concepts that are the building blocks of goal-oriented advertising: conversion goals and bidding strategy. Conversion goals. This is a group of conversion actions. A conversion action is an action that you want the user to take, such as purchase or submit a lead form. These groupings help you organize and track these actions to optimize towards the advertising objectives on an account or campaign. Typically, they consist of a primary action and a secondary action. The primary action is used for bidding, but the secondary action is usually used to report further success towards the objective. We'll come back to bidding in a minute. Bidding strategy. A bidding strategy is the approach taken to setting the bid price of ads in the auction. Automated bidding, such as that used in Performance Max, is when Google AI sets the price for you based on a range of signals, such as time of day, the specific ad being shown, the user's device, location, browser, or operating system. Crucially, they take signals from specified goals, continuously learn, and improve over time, getting closer to the goal. Teamwork makes the dream work, right? These two mechanisms work hand in hand to get results as efficiently as possible, so understanding them and configuring them is critical. Let's look at how we configure a conversion goal in Google Ads API. The first step is to understand which conversion goals are present on the account, so we can find that by making it a GACL request. Next, you can check the category as the one that you require, such as purchase, and the origin is correct, for example, website. Once we have found the right conversion action, we're going to copy it and use it with the campaign as the primary goal. The goals we want the bidding strategy to optimize towards, and in this case, purchase. Following these steps, we are going to create a campaign conversion goal, making sure to set the biddable flag to true, and also to create the mutate operations to construct this goal. This is the equivalent of the selection screen in the Google Ads UI. The main reason why we are selecting this is because account level goals might cover a range of goals simultaneously being executed on an account, but we want to have our PMax campaign tuned specifically to one of those goals. In a third-party interface, you might choose to pass the decision onto the end advertiser or an account manager to decide which goal they want the campaigns to optimize towards. But in this case, we already understand the intent. Sell my products from my website. So you already know to optimize the bidding towards purchase and website conversion. So what do you do if you don't see any conversion goals at the customer level? Well, these are automatically created by Google based on conversion actions that appear in the account. So how do the conversion actions appear in the account? Well, actions are triggered by a visit to a web page, for example when the customer loads the order place page, or programmatically sent to Google Ads when the event occurs, such as when a customer uses a coupon in a physical store. Think of these as mechanisms of telling Google that a conversion has happened. Typically, these would happen automatically after installing a tag manager on the website of the business, but there are other options, including an ad-specific tag, or using an analytics platform with Google Ads support, or submitting an offline conversion directly to Google Ads. The last one typically is used for actions that might happen in person, such as a store visit. There are plenty of resources covering setting up conversion tracking, which is required for most types of Google advertising, so we won't cover it in any more depth other than to say this is a critical part of providing the feedback loop from the presentation of your ads to the actions that you want your users to target. From this point on, we will assume that you are receiving conversions for your campaign. So remember in our product tour session, we talked about the two main types of bidding strategy. Well, can anyone remember what they were? Well, if you guessed maximize conversion and maximize conversion value, you got it right. And for both of these, we can set a target. Any guesses? So, for maximize conversion, it's target cost per action, or CPA, and for maximize conversion value, it's target return on ad spend, or ROAS. These two are the backbone of driving tangible value in PMax campaigns, and setting the right configuration is key to getting results. So who'd like to get $1,000 in sales for every $1 they spend on advertising? $1,000 in sales for every $1 spent is a ROAS of 100,000%. Doesn't sound particularly realistic, right? So setting a target that's too high may limit the amount of traffic that your ads might get. This highlights how important it is to understand what is feasible and when setting targets like target CPA and target ROAS. That is why using prior data and recommendations is such an important place to start. So the rule of thumb is setting a target ROAS based on the historical data of conversion value per advertising spend on other campaigns or platforms. So if you made $500 in sales revenue from a campaign and you spent $100 in advertising, then the ROAS would be 500 divided by 100, which is $5 per $1 spent. So 5 times 100 is 500% ROAS. Now you can set this as an initial target, but be aware that you need to use reporting to understand how your campaign is really performing against conversions and to understand how close you are to the target. We will cover more about accessing these metrics in the reporting session. Another tip for when you are updating your ROAS on your campaign, you should also account for conversion delays. This is the delay between the times when people click on the ad and when they perform a specific conversion action. This can sometimes cause CPA to look inflated and ROAS to look deflated. So how do you set this for a campaign? You set this as a property of the campaign itself when you create it or mutate it. You will need to find a method along the lines of set maximize conversion or set maximize conversion value. In Java, you will need to construct a maximize conversion or maximize conversion value object, which will allow you to then set a target CPA or target ROAS value. Remember, a ROAS input of 5.0 corresponds to a ROAS value of 500%. Next, you will create the campaign operations that will create or update this. You can modify the bidding strategy on a campaign. For example, you can switch from maximize conversions to maximize conversion value, but remember that doing so can interrupt the learning process the automated bidding is going through to optimize towards your target. We recommend that you wait at least a few weeks to understand what your actual ROAS looks like before making changes to your target. We've talked about how conversion goals and bidding strategy form a key part of achieving business goals for Performance Max campaigns. Now let's look at how we would take this and put it into an example for creating a lead generation or online sales Performance Max campaign using Google Ads API. I'm going to use the example of the functionality that you would need to build in order to enable Jenny's use case. I want to drive leads to my custom order request form on my website. So let's take a look. In the product tour, we briefly covered a walkthrough of the Google Ads UI to explain the steps required to construct a Performance Max campaign. In this section, we'll cover in more detail the steps required specifically relating to lead generation and online sales. After that, we will talk about some of the variants required to target other business goals mentioned, such as online sales with a product feed or travel goals. Since there is a lot of overlap between configuring the core components of Performance Max for each objective, instead of going through all of them from start to finish, I will instead highlight the key differences. Note that there are other Performance Max business objectives such as store goals that we won't be covering in this session, and you should be able to use most of the knowledge I'm going to share here to enable those objectives too. So let's start with our checklist of steps. So this is a screenshot of our PMax Developer Getting Started Guide. You can see at the top you have the option to select a business objective. As you do, the page changes to show you what is required for implementing that goal using Google Ads API. Familiarize yourself with the steps as required and follow the links to the relevant sections or references to understand more. To save some time, I've summarized the steps here. Take a minute to read what we're going to cover, and then I'll jump into what is needed to run a lead generation campaign on Jenny's website. So we're going to imagine that you're building an advertising interface on the administrative panel for a website that your business owns. The end advertiser is going to use this panel to configure a business goal-oriented Performance Max campaign and to set up their advertising. Remember I mentioned there's a mystery Advertise My Business on Google button? Well, this button is what starts this workflow to create a Performance Max campaign and will be implemented using Google Ads API. Because these other steps need the campaign resource, we're going to do this first, which is probably different to the order in which you ask for input from the advertiser. Based on the advice in the Structuring Request Guide, we're going to only create the campaign operation, but we will wait until we've constructed all the operations of the workflow before we execute it. Next is to decide whether the campaign will use conversion goals from the ads account or select specific conversion goals for the PMax campaign. Now this is a good opportunity to make sure that all conversion goals in the account align with the business goals. We're going to deliberately specify the conversion goals we want for this campaign because we want them to influence the bidding decision. You can see that when creating a campaign conversion goal, you can choose the category and source. Conversion action category has a wide number of categories we can look to use. For lead generation and simplicity, we're going to look for the customer conversion goal of submit lead form and the conversion origin of website. Importantly, we're going to set this as biddable to ensure that Performance Max can learn from this type of conversion. If you can't find the conversion action in the account, then you need to check the conversion tracking is installed correctly and the method is firing an event on the website. The workflow assumes that the form has already been set up and has been successfully firing submit lead form events. Now you can add a criteria to the campaign, for example, location, language, brand, and website, inclusions and exclusions. This is how your platform can allow advertisers to set targeting for the campaign. In Jenny's case, let's assume that she will want to restrict a campaign to serving ads within her area that her delivery supplier is able to deliver. If you omit location or location group targeting in the campaign, it will default to all regions. She could also support language targeting any languages that her website and marketing materials support. Again, this is something that you, the third-party platform, might be able to suggest based on the number of languages on her website, especially if you're in control of managing it for her. One quick point to mention, the negative campaign criteria for your website is how you're able to exclude pages from final URL expansion. You should probably exclude administrative pages and other non-public facing pages on the website that you don't want to drive traffic to. The next step is to add assets to the PMax campaign, which we will use to generate ads. Now I'm not going to go into detail here about the steps to submit assets and asset groups, as they will be covered in much more detail in the assets section. What I will do is highlight a few important considerations related to lead generation and online sales. So, check the asset requirements for each asset type in the developer documentation. This will give you a clear understanding about how many different variants of asset are required and the formats for each asset. This will give you, the platform developer, an indication of how many images an advertiser would need to provide and allow you to add some form of validation on your interface if the number is lower than the minimum required. The general rule of thumb is that the more quality assets and longer text assets leads to stronger ad strength. Create an asset group with a final URL that best leads to the mechanism of triggering that conversion. In our example, this would be the lead generation form page. For lead generation and non-product specific online sales, you should focus on adding assets that best represent the business or the lead you're trying to generate. For Jenny's case, images of custom flower arrangements that demonstrate the expertise of the business would be better than providing images of every available product. Remember that it is not always obvious which assets will generate the most leads, so it's better to include more options that Google AI can utilize and learn from. Assets, especially images, can come from a range of sources. If your third-party platform provides other business services to the advertiser, you might already have a business name, a logo, or a description of the business. You can pre-populate a lot of these fields, allowing the user to refine or replace with the ones that they want to upload through the interface. Don't forget about automatically generated assets that might also be able to help here. The important thing is giving enough control to the advertiser while making it easy to select options that you've suggested for them. Meeting the minimum requirements might enable the campaign to serve, but it does not necessarily provide the best performance for the campaign. Lead generation does require you to provide an asset configuration interface to ensure this. Interestingly, if you create a PMax campaign for online sales with a product feed, the minimum requirements are satisfied by the product feed from the Merchant Center, so no additional assets required. This might be a great place to start, but we recommend adding functionality to manage assets and to enhance performance for each business objective. The next step is to add asset signals if they are right for the asset group. For PMax, these include audience signals and search themes. Now, these are optional signals that, if provided, can help guide Google AI in areas you know perform well. Taking the example of audience signals, you are able to use the following: first-party data, such as remarketing lists and customer match lists, custom segments, Google audiences, for example, affinity, detailed demo, and in-market segments, and demographics. As a third-party platform, you might already be able to provide some of this audience data from the campaign, especially the first-party data that might already be managed from your platform. In this example, it was the website traffic from the users similar to her existing customers that led to additional sales. Again, we cover more on implementing audience signals in the asset session of the workshop, so stay tuned. Once all aspects of the campaign are constructed and the ads are successfully serving to users, the platforms should give the advertiser options to monitor performance using reporting, as well as the ability to make adjustments and improvements. Firstly, building a dashboard like the one Jenny used to understand where her leads come from can be tricky. The challenge is to understand the information that is most valuable to the advertiser from your platform, and whether you want to provide a high-level overview of performance metrics or whether you want to enable the customers to fully customize their view of the dashboard. To help you narrow down the information that is most relevant for lead gen and online sales, here is a short list of reports that you might consider using in such a dashboard. Also remember that recommendations can be used to suggest improvements to your campaign that are generated by Google. You can use reporting to access these recommendations and take action on behalf of the advertiser, or give them control to apply them themselves. As we have an in-depth session on reporting later that will cover the specific GACL queries to access and what they are suitable for. Now that we've covered the aspects of PMax that need to be considered for lead generation and online sales, we can cover a few variations that can enable different business goals. Online sales to the product feed, or Performance Max for retail, is different to standard online sales business objective in that it allows PMax to advertise from a list of products provided from a Google Merchant Center account. Each advertiser will need to have a Merchant Center account with products already uploaded. This can be done from a range of different methods, including using the Merchant Center interface, uploading a file feed, or programmatically using the Content API for shopping. Managing the Merchant Center account is out of scope for this session, so we suggest you follow the link for more information. Once you have a Merchant Center account that has a product feed, it can be linked with Google Ads programmatically using both Content API and Google Ads API. We have a guide explaining the steps to do this, and you can have a look at it here. Once both accounts are linked, there are a few steps to create a retail version of a PMax campaign. First, you need to create a shopping settings property of the PMax campaign, which allows you to configure the following fields. The most important ones are Merchant ID, which tells PMax which Merchant Center account to use the products from, Feed Label, which allows you to pick a specific feed of products from the Merchant Center account. Note that if this field is omitted, then the campaign will use all products in the account. You might have noticed a Use Vehicle Inventory field in the shopping settings. Unfortunately, this option is not for PMax. To specify to use your vehicle ads in PMax, First, your Merchant Center account needs to have Vehicle Ads program enabled. Then you should set campaign listing type to vehicles, then create the campaign in order to use the vehicle inventory. See the link for more information. Once the campaign is created with this setting, you will need to add asset groups for the products with it, at least one listing group in it, and this will be covered in more detail in the assets session of the workshop. For retail PMax campaigns, you will need to configure conversion goals that are associated with selling products. A perfect example would be to use the purchase conversion action with the source set to website. This conversion action would typically fire once an order is placed and payment is taken via the website. Note that if conversion tracking also includes the purchase value or conversion value, then you will be able to use the maximize conversion value bidding strategy. Finally, I'll briefly mention a list of reports that are specifically compatible with Performance Max for retail. Shopping Performance View for getting historical metrics for products sold via shopping channels. Shopping Product Report for getting the status and recent metrics for products available to advertise on the Google Ads account. Asset Group Product Group View for getting metrics associated with the listing groups included or excluded from the asset group. In the reporting session of this workshop, we'll cover GACL queries for these reports. Travel Goals is a variant of Performance Max where the objective is to advertise hotel properties and drive bookings. Unlike Hotel Ads, you don't need to have access to a Hotel Center account in order to use Performance Max for Travel Goals. Instead, you need to create a hotel asset set, which contains assets for all hotel properties you want to advertise, and then you need to associate it with the PMax campaign during creation. So here are the steps to implement Performance Max for Travel Goals. First, you'll need to create an asset set resource for your hotels that contain all the assets for each hotel property to advertise. Start by creating a hotel property asset set of type hotel property. Then, for each hotel property, you will need to 1. Create a new asset with a hotel property asset object. And 2. On this hotel property asset object, you will need to set a place ID. The place ID is a unique ID that identifies the place on Google Maps. You can look up your hotel properties with the Place ID Finder on the Google Maps platform. See the link for more details. 3. Then you will need to link your new asset to the hotel asset set using the Asset Set Asset resource. Now, for asset group creation, there is a service and method specific to Travel Goals to help with generating assets for your PMax campaign. This is the Travel Asset Suggestion service and the Suggest Travel Assets method. The service takes a place ID in a language and will return assets from that place ID that you can use in your asset group. It's important to note that the service may not return all the needed assets to meet the minimum asset requirements, so be prepared to add more yourself if required. This service is allow list only at present, so contact your Google representative if you manage hotel properties and want to use PMax. The final step is to create the PMax campaign and set the hotel asset set during campaign creation. Then you can add the asset groups you've created from the suggestion service. There is a code example explaining all of these steps, so follow the link for more information. Now that we've covered 3 of the main business goals that are possible with Performance Max and Google Ads API, hopefully you'll be clearer on the use cases for each one and where to find the resources for the Google Ads API. So in summary, we've discussed the importance of defining business goals and what use cases that Performance Max can help achieve, the role of conversion goals and bidding strategy and how these 2 aspects of PMax work together to converge on advertiser goals, and the introduction of 3 key business goals and how to configure them using Google Ads API. Online sales and lead gen, online sales with product feed, and travel goals. I hope we have left you with many thinking points about the business goals and what it might look like for PMax and your campaigns. Listen to our other sessions that go into more detail on topics such as assets and reporting. So thanks for attending and see you soon.